Hello and welcome back to Building on a Budget Models. I'm Thomas and this is the full build of the Tamiya 2001 Subaru Impreza rally car. The first thing I did was sand down some of the mould lines on the bodywork. They were mainly around the bumpers and somewhere around the windows as well. I mainly used my UMP thin sanding sticks for these. Then there were a few body parts to add before painting, such as these fog light covers at the front. If you've got the Great Britain version, these may need to be left open depending on whether you want to leave the fog lights on or not. There's also a scoop here which goes on top of the bonnet. Makes sense to paint these after gluing them together. I added a little bit of black paint to the inside of the roof scoop just for some shade. And it's also important to drill through the holes for the two roof aerials. They were primed in a couple of coats of light grey primer from Tamiya. It's also an opportunity to look for imperfections. It was then given 4 coats of Tamiya TS50 mica blue. Really like this finish. After I'd let it cure for a couple of days, it was then time to do the decals. Now these fluorescent yellow Subaru decals on the side come in 2 parts. It's important to do the larger one first. However, if I was doing this again, I think I probably would have cut out the stars separately, as there's quite a lot of transparent carrier film here. To position that correctly, there's also little sort of cutouts to show around the door handles, which helps. I used some micro set and then some UMP strong decal solution to help this adhere as best as possible. And then there's some little positioning marks on the first decal to show you where to line up the second decal. I found using the hairdryer helped a lot with this to help it adhere to the complex shapes. Before the decal has set, I use a new craft blade to cut down the door lines. I then use some strong decal solution to help them adhere as best as possible. These are very high quality decals. This kit was port new, so that really helps. There's 2 decal sheets, I think, done like that because the yellow colours need to be printed separately. Make sure you get the right number plates and numbers depending on which car you've chosen to do. I'm here doing Richard Burns's number 5 car. Once the decals were all applied, I left it for a couple of days and then gave it 4 coats of clear gloss acrylic from Halfords. When I then let that cure for about a week, I then came back and wet sanded it, firstly with some 2000 grit sandpaper to flatten out clear gloss. It's important to wipe away some of the water so you can see where it needs to be sanded a little bit more. I tend to sand in up and down, left and right patterns, never circular patterns as that can leave swirl marks. I then used some Kent Models Hyper Polish. I tried to rub this into the surface as much as possible. You can buy kits like this and many more from Kent Models. Use the code BOBE10 for 10% off. Then firstly I started by using a microfiber cloth, but then came back with these fine buffing pads which I got from Amazon on the end of a Dremel at a very slow speed. Always very nervous doing this over the top of the decals, but happily enough there was enough of the clear gloss for this to work fine. I gave this about 3 going overs on each of the main body panels, being very careful around some of the kind of raised edges and also where some of the decals were. Pretty happy with that. I think that's a nice finish. was then time to do the undercarriage. Firstly, it was painted in the same TS50, and then I added details in Revell silver and aluminium. Part of the exhaust needs to be in white, and then there's other bits in pale blue. You then add in front drive part. Rear suspension is a little bit more complicated with a few more parts, but you can secure them in with some thin cement from the underside. I used some blue paint and a cocktail stick to do the springs, then attach them to the brakes like so. These fuel tanks were done in semi-gloss black, and the front kind of wishbones were done in mixture of silver and semi-gloss black. I find it very important to dry fit all of these before gluing them in, just to make sure that the fit is correct. Then there's this controlling arm here at the front to help the wheels turn in unison. Make sure to put the polycaps on before adding the disc brakes. Disc brakes were done in iron with the calipers in silver and the centres in gold. And the best way to assemble these parts was to do it all away from the body, and then once it was all secure, then to add it into place. This part of the drive mechanism was painted in a mixture of ochre and orange. The skid plates are on the clear sprue, so you can choose whether to paint them or not. I did choose to paint this one silver, however. There's a few other suspension parts, mainly in semi-gloss black, and I also added some black panel line accent to the vents on the discs to add a little bit of kind of wear and tear. Now the wheels are already painted in a really nice gold finish, which I decided to keep. All the wheels are the same, so no problem with which tyres go on which. I used a little bit of iron paint to do the wheel nuts on each one. The instructions also give you tips on the tread pattern. There are a few decals that go in the middle of them, such as these OZ ones. I found that decal solutions such as the UMP Strong that I use was very useful here because they didn't really want to lay into the curves without a little bit of help. There's a very small P0 decal which goes on the tyre, and then because I'd added all those decals, I gripped the wheels from the outside and pushed them on. Now the exhaust system here is done in matte white, or a kind of satin white, and then once that's all glued together you add an aluminium strip to the catalytic converter here, and also the tailpipe is in silver. You could add some weathering detail to this if you wanted to. I decided to leave this car looking clean though. Now for the interior, it's also done in the same TS50, but the section down the centre is done in aluminium. The seats were done in matte black. I didn't paint the backs of them though, as a decal would go on there later on. Now these extinguishers were done in gloss red, and then I used some silver on a cocktail stick to do like the clips and the ties and things like that. Pretty happy with that. And then there's some decals that go on top of them. There's little sort of separate parts in the decals to show where they curve around the ties. Lots of micro set down first for the seat backs. These are supposed to simulate carbon fibre. You'll want to use some scissors to cut these like so. It might be easier to do this before the decals are all wet. I also added some extra carbon fibre to some of these places, such as this footwell. This is just Tamiya carbon fibre sheet. There's other things, like I think this is a first aid box. Another extinguisher here. I added some carbon fibre to some of the other parts, and then once that had cured, I used these Posca paint pens to detail the buttons. Also added some carbon fibre to this lever here, and detailed the spring using some silver on a cocktail stick. Pedals go in so, like so. And then there's a few decals that go on other parts of the seats. And I had these MSM Creations buckles, as well as some blue ribbon to simulate the seat belts. Firstly, I cut them into about 9cm lengths. Now this was longer than I needed, but there we are. And I found that if you do the end in a kind of point, that goes through the buckles nice and easily. Leave the buckles on the fret before you have got them attached, as that makes them a lot easier to hold. I found that when this one's in the right position, then using a little bit of super glue and folding over the end holds that buckle in place. Pretty happy with that. This lap belt is made of several parts, so the wax pencil can help move the pieces together. And then these kind of come out of the same place, so I put both of those and glued them together like so. Now I didn't actually open up the holes in the sides of the seats for these belts, so I just kind of laid them on top as if they were coming out of the right place. I think that looks okay. I think that looks okay. It's then time to cut out the Sabelt decals, and I used some extra strong decal solution from UMP to fix these. Some of them came off, so I replaced them with some stickers that I had spare. You need a lot of decal solution to fit these onto ribbons. It's just a test fit to make sure I was happy with the position of it all. And then I started to add the roll cage, which had also been done in TS50. There's some light grey mat, which is on the kind of foam padding. And then there's also this bucket section at the back for the helmets, which needs to kind of be placed around the back of the roll cage. Now this top section here needs the seat belts affixed to it, so I tested the length like so. Found that the belts were a little bit longer than they needed to, but that's good, better than being too short. Then cut them to length, folded them over and used some super glue. If I was wanting to be really accurate, I would use some extra buckles for those, but never mind. I then used some foam safe super glue to fit those seats into place, with the roll cage still attached, which was then curved over the top of them. Thin cement was used to glue the roll cage together. This parcel shelf needs to be held in place because the join isn't very strong. and there's a little ProDrive decal that goes on the top of that. I chose to do the door cards first in black and then masked over the plastic or carbon fibre section to do the rest of them in TS50. I think that's more accurate representation of how they look on the real car. There's then decals that go on the side for the co-driver and the main driver, and some sponsors that go on the back door. There's Richard Burns' name. I think that looks pretty good. These can be glued onto the side of the roll cage as well as onto the floor. Now then, within this kit there are two helmets. These are made up of two parts like so. I chose to glue them together first, then to try and sand away the seam and then to paint them in silver. Then the inside of them is painted in matte black, and the visor in semi-gloss black. There's this blue Subaru decal which wraps around the back. It's a good idea to cut these little slits out first. And also this orange Subaru decal that goes over the top. Found putting it on the end of a cotton bud like this with a little bit of blue tack was a good way of holding the helmet without accidentally moving the decals. Like before, I used some strong decal solution to help these adhere as best as possible, and when they'd cured, there's then a few Bell logos to add in different places. When those had cured, I touched up a little bit of the cracks in the blue and the orange with some blue and orange acrylic from Revell. Now for the dashboard, it was first done in a sort of satin grey, then I did details in black, and then added some more Tamiya carbon fibre decals, like here around the digital display. Decal solution is really useful here to help it adhere as best as possible, and you can also use a hairdryer to help it adhere to those complex shapes. When I was happy that it had started to set, I used cotton bud to push it into place. Then there's this digital display that goes in the centre of the dashboard, and a little Subaru decal that goes there, not that you can really see it. Just like before, I used the Posca paint pen to add some of the buttons. These are really good, really vibrant finish. I recommend them to anyone who likes adding details like this. I'm pretty happy with that. Carbon fibre adds a nice little touch. Steering wheel is then done in So with anthracite around the outside. Also used some paint pens for the buttons. And that slots into place really nicely. There's then some chrome stickers, including this rear view mirror. Glue needs to be quite strong to hold this into place. I found that it fell out a couple of times, but there we are, the interior is done. Now the rear wing is a completely separate part, important to sand away some of those burrs before painting it. I found that these joins were some of the weakest in the kit, unfortunately. Found that I needed to hold them in place for quite a long time whilst the poly cement cured. But it's a good idea to assemble this before paint, as you will find gluing it together even harder when they are already painted. There we are. was then time to do the window trims. I used my old method of Tamiya masking tape, then a cocktail stick to push it into place, and then a very nice new craft blade to cut around the edge. There we are, peeled off to expose the area. Did the same down the sides, and that was then painted in semi-gloss black. You may also want to go over this with a cotton bud to make sure it's pushed in really well, but at least with the Revell acrylic, mistakes can be removed quite easily. Also felt confident enough with a very thin brush to do these strips along the roof freehand. And along the windows as well. This isn't my favourite job, but I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out. It's then time to do the window masks. These go on the inside of the front and rear window. Make sure to check the instructions carefully of which one is which. I think the front window is larger than the rear. Now, I zoomed in too much here, which is why it's off camera, but I chose to use some matte black paint and to brush this on. Whenever you're doing this, make sure the masks are pushed down really firmly so that no paint is able to bleed underneath. Peel that away when you are happy that it's all cured and that it looks nice and opaque. You don't want to peel these away too early because they won't be as useful once you've peeled them off. And even though this is matte black from the outside, that looks nice and shiny. There's then this section here for the windscreen wipers. Needs to be done in semi-gloss black. Be very careful when gluing this in because you don't want to accidentally get any glue on the windscreen. There's a little button that goes on there which needs to be in red. Then there's some mesh that needs to go on the inside, down by the radiator. And then there's some nice little tabs at the top to help you fit the windows into place. Now for the bug eye lights at the front, I cut some Tamiya carbon fibre into the right size. Then used some microsol to start with and then gave it a liberal dousing of extra strong decal solution from UMP and gave it a good old blast with the hairdryer. When I was happy that that had kind of adhered to the right shape, I used sort of tweezers to open up the holes for the headlights and also a craft knife to cut around the section at the top. Then there's this radiator section here. This needs to have a little STI decal on it. I actually destroyed the original one by putting too much decal solution on it, but thankfully later on I was able to print out a replacement. There's a few sections here that go underneath the bonnet to factor in where the vents are and things like that. It's quite nice to have this interior detail even if you can't really see much of it when it's finished. Then when I was happy that the decal had cured, there's a couple of little headlights. I painted the inside of the headlight housing silver and then used some foam safe super glue to secure these headlights into place. Then a little lip around the bottom which helps you glue them into place nice and securely. You want to give these a little bit of a firm push to make sure that they just pop into place correctly. There we are, you can see the carbon fibre on those. Now the rear lights are like no other Tamiya kit that I've seen, where you've got a bit moulded in red, a bit moulded in clear, and also this chrome sheet. Now the chrome sheet has little letters and patterns for you to cut out. I found this quite challenging with the craft knife, so you may want to use scissors. These then go onto the back, like so. And then that clips into place on the red tail light, and then you put a larger chrome sticker over the back of those to keep it all together. You want to push this down as firmly as possible, because otherwise there's a chance that the white tail light may pop out. They then go into place like so, and just like the front lights, try to pop them into place so they're nice and secure. The little interior thing here, I think it might be an interior light or something, I'm not sure. But then once all those are in place, it's time to put the body together with the interior and undercarriage. It goes in the back first, and there's some nice little tabs so that if you do make any mistakes or you've forgotten anything, you can always remove this later. I should say that I chose to put one helmet in the back. There's a couple of little pinholes to show you where the rear spoiler needs to go. This kind of hangs over the back of the car, so you'll want to hold that into place for a while whilst it's secure. Then there's orange side indicators. These are already moulded in clear orange, so just a little bit of glue and in they go. I chose to leave the skid plates clear so that you could see the detail on the undercarriage. I could always come back to this later and add some iron or even some weathering should I want to. The rear one needs to fold just a little bit underneath the exhaust system, like so. Then for this skid plate at the front, I added some carbon fibre, and I also added carbon fibre to the wing mirror. For Richard Burns' car, he only had the wing mirror on the right and a kind of blank plate on the other side. Now I found that the bonnet pins in the front didn't fit very well, so I found some MSM Creations photo etch ones in the same set as the seatbelt buckles. The kit ones are quite nice, but I just found that they didn't fit into the holes. Then some window sun strips, and also the names of the drivers that go on the rear windows. This is from the Monte Carlo Rally, so there's the little red Monte Carlo Rally decal at the back. Then you've got the two aerials that go in the roof. These were already moulded in plastic, in black plastic, so I didn't see the need to paint them. And there we are, it's finished. I'm really happy with how this has turned out. The Bug-Eye Subaru Impreza is a little bit of a divisive car, but it's one of my absolute favourites, driven by one of my favourite drivers to his only world title, Richard Burns. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you've built this, how you think I got on compared to you. I also took some photos with some of my Rally Mechanics figures, also from Tamiya. You can see a video of those linked above and in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like, share, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.